So welcome everybody. I want to kind of welcome you all to today's topic. Today our guest speaker is Sonia and Ancoli Israel. Pioneer, as we said in our out kind of market to this. She's a pioneer in sleep science, professor emeritus. I always get that wrong. It's psychiatry and a professor of research at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine. And she's done a lot of work. If you have the opportunity after this session to definitely look her up. She has a ton of articles out there, does a lot of work around sleep and circadian rhythm, sleep and aging, and really excited that she's agreed to join us as a part of our series around different elements of the wellness wheel and how we can start looking at integrating it into our practices, hopefully for the month of May, that many of you guys can join us for our next 30-day experience. So Sonia, again, thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this conversation. We record these for our broader community and send them out there because not everyone has availability, but I just want to kind of just start by opening up and just getting a sense of, for the group to get a sense of who you are and how you got into this work. And then we'll just, like we said, we'll just kind of ask questions and the audience gets involved periodically as well. So welcome again, Sonia.
Happy to. I feel like those of you who are old enough to remember the show, What's My Line? And at the end, they would say, "With the real Sonia and Ancoli Israel, please stand up." So a lot of you have my name attached to your picture because of the way the links were sent. I am the real Sonia and Ancoli Israel. And then maybe some of you could change them, change back to your name so I can see who you are. How did I get into this? I was always interested in the mind-body connection. I started out doing research in biofeedback, psychophysiology, and then I moved. I was in San Francisco finishing my doctorate. I moved down to San Diego to be with my boyfriend at the time. Then he was my husband for 41 years. But when I came to San Diego, I went looking for a job. And there was a psychiatrist at UCSD, Dan Kripke, who did work in sleep, which is part of the greater psychophysiology area of study. And psychophysiology just means the brain-body connection. And Dan said to me, "Well, I don't have any money, but I have a desk and a phone if you want to sit down and write a grant." And right around that time, the National Institutes of Aging and of Mental Health had sent out a request for applications on studies looking at sleep and aging. This is back in the late 70s. We knew almost nothing about what happens to sleep as we get older. I wrote a grant, it got funded, and as they say, the rest is history.
Wow.
So
wow.
That's how I started out.
And in your journey, what has changed between the science of sleep back then and the findings since then? I mean, I know there's probably that we could speak for days on this one, but what are the big ones from your perspective?
We're talking 40 years. There's a lot that's changed.
Yeah.
I think, probably some of the biggest changes is we became a field of medicine. So now it was just called sleep. Now it's sleep medicine. We learned so much more about sleep disorders, sleep apnea, even insomnia. The definition and what we know about insomnia has changed over time. Treatments have certainly changed. And we know much more about why we sleep. We still don't know the full purpose of sleep, but we know more about what happens during sleep. So there's been so many more about the genetics of sleep. I mean, there's so much that has been learned in the last 40 years, and we still have a long way to go. There's still a lot more that we need to learn.
What was your particular, because again, before we got into the call, I'd said you've done some sleep and circadian rhythm and sleep and aging. So what was your particular specialty? What were you kind of jumping into?
I had two lines of research. The first, as I say, was aging. So I started out studying how prevalent, how common, specifically sleep apnea is in older adults. We had no idea at that point. No one had looked at that. We knew what sleep apnea was. We knew what some of the consequences was, but I was particularly interested in how common it was in the older population. And the punchline is it's very common, much more common in older adults than younger adults. But that then led me into looking at sleep in nursing home populations, looking at not just sleep apnea, but sleep itself in dementia and Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. Sleep becomes so disruptive. We now know that poor sleep and sleep apnea independently both increase the risk of dementia, We know that people who have dementia have very poor sleep. So, it's bidirectional. So that was one whole line of research. And then so that started 40 years ago. And then about maybe 25, 30 years ago, maybe less, I became interested in fatigue and sleep and circadian rhythms in cancer. So let me back up and tell you what we're talking about when we say circadian rhythms. Circadian means about 24. So circadian rhythms are our biological clock, which runs in about a 24-hour cycle. It's actually a touch longer than 24. And if we didn't have the sun coming up every morning, we would constantly shift because we are longer than 24. But that bright light every morning helps sync us back with our environment. That was a little tangent. So circadian rhythms are our biological clocks. And we have many clocks throughout our body. The main primary clock is in our brain, in an area called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN. And there are many things in our body that have these 24-hour rhythms. Blood pressure has a 24-hour rhythm. Blood pressure takes a dip at night. That's part of the rhythm. Core body temperature takes a dip. And we'll talk, actually has a 24-hour, and I'll talk some more about core body temperature because that's important. Hormones have 24-hour rhythms, and sleep-wake is a 24-hour rhythm. So when we talk about circadian rhythms, that's what we're talking about. So I became interested in the relationship between fatigue, sleep, and circadian rhythms, particularly in breast cancer, and particularly in women going through chemotherapy. And if there are questions about that, I can talk about that. We started out doing many observational studies to just understand what was going on. We ended up doing some treatment studies trying to alleviate the fatigue, and we were quite successful in that. So that was my second line of research. So aging was one and cancer was the other.
Wow, it's so fascinating, Sonia. And I just want to encourage people to either write questions in chat. We're happy to stop wherever the interest is. With what you were just saying, though, in terms of, I'm obviously the research is really, really fascinating. Here we are, fast forward to a year into this pandemic. As you mentioned, the pandemic probably had a pretty profound effect on our sleep in general. What have you noticed this past year, I guess, both anecdotally and through your own research, and for all of us who are trying to wrap our minds around the value of sleep, just in general? Can you just speak a little bit about, where things lie right now and how you see things as we are in the midst and hopefully towards the end of this crazy year?
Right. Yeah. So I think the pandemic has done two things, or let me put it a different way. There are two different ways that people have reacted to being stuck at home. The first is sort of a positive effect in that we were no longer, most of us, having to get up early in the morning to get dressed, to drive through traffic, to get to work. And so for the first time, probably in forever, our bodies were allowed to sleep on their own rhythm, on their own clock. So for many people, many people in our society have been sleep deprived, chronically sleep deprived. They go to bed late, they have to get up early to go to work. They try to make up for sleep on the weekend, and you can't really, the weekend isn't long enough to make up for all that chronic sleep deprivation. Suddenly we were able to sleep as much as our body wanted. And so people first were able to figure out what their real rhythm is, when they really wanted to go to sleep and when they really wanted to get up, because they weren't forced by the outside societal pressures to change that. So that was a good thing. And many people actually started catching up on their sleep and feeling better because for the first time they were getting sufficient sleep every night. So that's one of the things that happened. The other thing that happened to also a very large group of people is the stress that's associated with worrying about COVID, being stuck at home, wondering if they're going to be able to pay the rent or, all the other things that go along with that. And for those people, sleep became much more disrupted. All that extra anxiety and stress made sleep worse. And so those are sort of the two lines of consequences of the pandemic. What's going to be very interesting now is as the world is starting to open up some, what will happen? Will people remember that their body wanted to sleep from, 9 to 5 rather than 12 to 8 or whatever, and still try to listen to their bodies and figure that out? Will people who have been so stressed be able to let that go? Insomnia is often perpetuated by our behavior. And if during the last year and a half, we've learned all these bad behaviors around our sleep, that is going to perpetuate itself. And the insomnia will, if it hasn't already, will become more chronic. And so for those people that had the negative effect of COVID, they may have to work a little harder to get back to normal sleep. Even though the stress may be gone, they may now have this chronic insomnia.
And is there a way to, in essence, coach ourselves to become better sleepers?
There is. Are we ready for that? Or should we, maybe before? I know everyone's nodding.
No, but what were you going to say though?
Give me some.
Before I do that, I want to back up a little bit because the tips that I'm going to give you will make more sense if I give you a little background.
Love it.
So what I want to do, and I think, Yosef, you actually were reminding me that I said I would do this, so thank you. But I want to tell you about sort of what sleep is and how sleep is controlled, because that's what's getting out of sync when we develop insomnia, for example. So we talk about sleep being controlled by two processes. One is we call it a homeostatic process. And essentially that's our sleep drive or our need for sleep, right? The longer you're awake, the more that need for sleep increases, right? So as you go out throughout the day, you get more and more tired until you get so tired, you fall asleep. That sleep drive is so high, you fall asleep. And once you fall asleep, that need for sleep dissipates because you're asleep, right? That makes sense so far? Okay. So then the question becomes, what keeps you from falling asleep as that sleep drive is increasing during the day? So at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, that need to sleep is pretty high, but maybe it's not the time for your body to go to bed yet. So what keeps you from falling asleep? It's our circadian alerting system. It also increases throughout the day. So in the morning, your alerting system is low because your sleep drive is low. So you don't need a lot of help to stay awake. But as you get more and more tired throughout the day, you need help staying awake. So the circadian alerting system increases. And then it's when they get to sort of that balance point at night that you're able to fall asleep. Everything goes back down until the next morning when it all starts again. So we have the circadian influence and the homeostatic or the sleep drive influence. And it's the balance of those two that help us stay awake during the day and sleep at night. And it's when those two sort of get out of sync, we start having trouble sleeping. There are two more cycles or things that are important within that. One is we have a melatonin rhythm. Now, I'm not talking about the melatonin that you buy in the drugstore. I'm talking about the melatonin that we secrete in our brain. Melatonin is our hormone of darkness. It is secreted in darkness and it helps us sleep. It doesn't put us to sleep, but it helps us sleep. And so that helps, and melatonin goes up at the start of the night as it gets darker and darker, and then it starts decreasing. And then when the light comes on, it tells the brain stop secreting melatonin. So that's another rhythm that helps us in our sleep wake. And the last one is our core body temperature rhythm. I mentioned that before. So core body temperature is different than your peripheral temperature. It's actually the opposite. So if your hands are cold, that means, or if you're meaning, low temperature, that means your core body temperature is high, right? They're opposite. So core body temperature drops at night. That's when we get sleepy. It rises in the morning. That's when we wake up. And that's an important concept in all of this. Core body temperature also takes a dip in the afternoon. And that's why we get sleepy after lunch. And as you know, there are whole societies that actually sleep in the afternoon, right? The siesta. Many of them have given it up, unfortunately. But if you look at those societies that do sleep in the afternoon, you find they have dinner, they go to sleep much later at night than we do in our society. So in a 24-hour, in our culture, so in a 24-hour period, they're sleeping the same amount of time that we do. They just do it in 2 bouts. We tend to do it in 1. And physiologically speaking, the way they do it makes more sense because of that dip of the core body temperature in the afternoon. Okay, so that's sort of how sleep is controlled. Now, as I said, if any of those get out of sync, that's where problems begin. There are other things that can happen that can cause problems, like other primary sleep disorders, like sleep apnea. And if people have questions about that, I'm happy to answer it, or restless leg syndrome, or, narcolepsy. There are lots of other primary sleep disorders. But most people, if they're going to have problems sleeping, have insomnia. We define insomnia as difficulty falling asleep or difficulty staying asleep. And that difficulty has to result in some daytime consequence. So if you tell me you only sleep 5 hours a night, but you're absolutely fine during the day, that's not insomnia. So, and the consequences could be difficulty with concentration, difficulty with attention, difficulty with memory, difficulty in performance, whether it's at school or work, interactions, poor interactions with the people around you, apathy, depression, or just anxiety about not being able to sleep. There's a whole list of these things. So there has to be some sort of consequence. There's also a duration requirement. You have to have this difficulty sleeping at least 3 times a week, and it has to have lasted for at least 3 months. If it's less than that, you're still having difficulty sleeping, but we wouldn't give you a diagnosis of insomnia. Okay. So now you want me to get into my tips? Are we already ready for that? We're so early into this.
Can I have a few questions off of all that. And
there was also a question from Martha about the use of CBN and CBD and melatonin.
Yeah, I'll get to that.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So I just for clarification's sake, you had just mentioned 5 hours at that if one is getting 5 hours of sleep, generally speaking, I know people who say, oh, I sleep 5 hours, I'm totally fine. That's just all the sleep I need. Basically what you're saying is that no matter whatever human you are, if you are sleeping 5 hours consistently, you have potentially, cognitive decline, all those other things that you just rattled off. Just to dispel that for the those that say they don't need that much sleep.
Yeah, so let's clarify that. That may have been a bad example. We need 7 to 8 hours of sleep as adults, no matter what your age. Adolescents need more, and I do want to talk a little bit about adolescent sleep for you, but as adults, whether adults or older adults, 7 to 8 hours of sleep.
Would that be unaided? Like, for example, not
Correct.
taken? Okay. Yep.
And that's in general how much sleep you need. How you get it is a different question, but you need 7 to 8. And if you can't get it on your own, then aided would help. But the point is you need 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. Anything less than that is not sufficient and will certainly increase the risk for all those other consequences that I mentioned. Now, what often happens is people have chronic partial sleep deprivation because they're sleeping 6 hours a night. And after 3 or 4 days of that, the consequences are the same as pulling an all-nighter. Okay. So 6 hours of sleep every night, 5 hours of sleep is not sufficient. Now, here's the thing. I said If you're sleeping only 5 hours, I said that off the top of my head, and you have no consequences, then it's not insomnia. Here's the kicker in all this. You are the worst judge of whether you're affected by not getting enough sleep. The people around you may notice it, but the more sleep deprived you are, the worse you are in judging how you're doing. So if you tell me I sleep only 5 hours and I'm fine, I'm going to say, yeah, I bet you're not. I may not say it quite like that, but that's going to be the take-home message. So yeah, 5 hours of sleep is not enough. We all need 7 to 8. Now, there are individual differences. There are some people that really are short sleepers. It's very rare. Most people that think they're short sleepers are not.
Is part of that because
some people that are, one sec, there are some people that are long sleepers. But again, sometimes if you're sleeping 9, 10 hours every single night, there might be something else going on that's causing that excessive sleepiness. Yeah. Scott, you were going to ask.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I do a lot of work up in Butte County with stress stuff. And one of the things we talk about with chronic stress is that because your body is moving towards homeostasis, wants to find that balance, that the chronic becomes and feels normal, right? And so I'm wondering if that's part of that sense of that 5 hours feels normal because their body's adjusted, but what they're doing is that they're killing their telomeres. They're really doing a lot of bad. Because I hear people say, I'll just sleep when I'm dead. And it's like, that's the worst thing.
Oh, I know. It's such a macho thing. Yeah. And it's not that their body adjusts. It's that psychologically they think they're okay. Yeah. But the body's not adjusting. The body's going through a lot of stress and other things because they are chronically sleep deprived. Yeah.
I just want to open the floor here real quick. Does anybody have anything else they want to insert here?
I will talk about the treatments, including the melatonin and CBD, et cetera. But there are a couple other things I want to get to before I do that. So let me tell you something else about circadian rhythms and sleep. So at different times in our life, our circadian rhythms shift. Okay. So for most adults, the typical sleep-wake pattern is we get sleepy somewhere around, 10 o'clock. That's when our core body temperature drops. We sleep for 7 to 8 hours. So we get up, at 6, 7, 8 the next morning, depending when you went to sleep. But at different times in our life, this pattern shifts. So adolescents, teenagers, young adults don't get sleepy till much later in the night or early morning, maybe midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, because their core body temperature isn't dropping till those later hours. And teenagers need 9 to 10 hours of sleep, as opposed to us with our 7 to 8. So if you do the math, they're not going to sleep till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and they need 9, 10 hours of sleep, right? They're sleeping till what, 10, 11, noon, right? What did we always yell at our children when they were teenagers, or our parents yelled at us? Stop being so lazy, stop sleeping the whole day away, right? Well, it turns out it's very normal. We call that a delayed sleep phase. And eventually they outgrow it, meaning that they shift back to the more adult typical phase. But some people stay delayed their whole lives, and those are our owls. If you're an owl, you know you're an owl. Okay, Martha, you're an owl. Yeah, you know it. You know you can't fall asleep till late at night, and you want to sleep late into the morning. The problem with that, it becomes a problem if you have to be at a job or at school at 7 in the morning. That's why there's such a big deal all around the world, really, about high school start times. They start way too early for the kids' physiology. They have to sit in a math class at 7:30 in the morning. That's like the rest of us trying to sit in a math class at 3 in the morning. And that's why often high school kids sleep through their first 2 classes. It's just they're not ready. Their body's not ready to wake up. So that's our delayed sleep phase. Those are our owls. Most people, as I say, will shift back to the typical phase. But as we continue to get older, I don't see too many older people in these pictures. Maybe some of the other Sonias are older. I don't know, like me.
So kind.
As we continue to get older, the pattern continues to shift or to advance. so that older people have what we call advanced sleep phase, which means we get sleepy earlier in the evening. You know, that's why you have early bird specials, right? Older people eat earlier and they get tired 7, 8 o'clock. And if they went to bed at that hour, they'd have no trouble falling asleep. They would sleep their 7 to 8 hours. But again, do the math. When's their night going to be over? 3, 4, 5 in the morning. And they wake up and they say, oh my God, I've got sleep maintenance insomnia. I can't stay asleep. I'm waking up too early. Well, they're not. They're physiologically speaking, their night is done. Their core body temperature is rising. It doesn't matter that the sun hasn't come out yet, right? There are two scenarios that happen with this older advanced pattern. The first is they make themselves stay awake because who goes to sleep at 8 o'clock? It's just not acceptable, right? Right. Well, yeah, I do too sometimes, but for most people, they say it's not acceptable. So they stay up, but they still wake up at 4 in the morning because that's when their core body temperature is rising. Now they get up during they get tired. They might nap in the afternoon. That nap allows them to stay awake later into the evening. Remember, that's our homeostat, right? So they can stay awake later, but they're still waking up early. Now they can't get their 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night. If you're only in bed for 5, you can't sleep 7 to 8 hours. So they're forced to nap every day. Now, if they got their 8 hours and that fit into their schedules, it wouldn't be a problem, but often it doesn't. And they end up being sleep deprived and they complain to their doctor about having insomnia when it's not. Second scenario is they come home, they sit down to have an early dinner. After dinner, they sit down to read or watch TV, and what happens? They fall asleep. And they sleep maybe half an hour, maybe an hour, then they wake up, they get ready for bed, they get into bed, and now what happens? Wide awake, right? Again, that's our homeostat. They were just asleep, so they haven't been awake long enough to be sleepy enough to fall back to sleep, but they still wake up at 4 in the morning. And now they come to see me. When I was seeing patients, they say, oh, I have terrible insomnia. I can't fall asleep. I can't stay asleep. But it's, again, not insomnia. It's an advanced sleep phase with some very bad habits. And that bad habit is sleeping in front of the TV in the early evening. By the way, if you ask them, do you nap in the evening? No. Turns out sleeping in front of the TV doesn't count as a nap. So you have to know how to ask the question to find out what's really going on. But anyway, so that's an advanced sleep phase. Now, again, if going to bed early and waking up early fits into your lifestyle, that's great. But many people don't like being advanced. Many people, and we call those morning larks, right? So people don't like being larks. Some people don't like being owls. And there are things you can do to shift back to that typical adult phase. And the way we do that primarily is with light. Light is, and this is one of my tips for you. So start if you're dozing off. And by the way, I always say, if you fall asleep while I'm speaking, I know that it means you have a sleep problem and has nothing to do with this very entertaining conversation. So light is the strongest cue that our body has for knowing when to wake up and when to go to sleep. And it's also the strongest cue for stabilizing our circadian rhythm. In general, we don't get enough light because we're sitting in dark rooms. Maybe now during COVID, people went outside a little more. I don't know, but in general, we don't get enough light. And all these bright lights that we have shining so that we look nice on Zoom, they don't count. It's really incredibly light. The best source of bright light is the sun. For our owls, Martha, pay attention. I know you're taking notes. Morning light is the best way to advance your rhythm, to shift you in the other direction. And the key is to get that morning light without sunglasses, because the mechanism of the light helping your clock is through the eyes. So get morning light, and that will help you get sleepy earlier and wake up earlier. I would say if you could get outside for at least half an hour, that's a good approach. Sometimes for people who are owls, we also recommend melatonin. Now, This is, this is important. Most people take way too high a dose of melatonin. You know how you say if one pill is good, two must be better? With melatonin, if one is good, half is better. The lower the dose, the more effective it is. And I'm not talking now about melatonin as a sleeping pill. I will get to that. I know that question is still out there. I promise I'll answer that. I'm talking about using melatonin to shift your rhythms, like for jet lag, be the same kind of thing. 0.25, 0.5, sometimes you can't even buy that. You have to buy a 1 milligram and, you know, get a pill cutter and cut it. And you take it at about 6 o'clock in the evening. Again, you're not taking it to make you sleepy. You're taking it to pull your rhythm. So the melatonin will pull your rhythm forward and the light will push it. And together you can start waking up earlier. Getting sleepy earlier and then waking up earlier in the morning, okay? For people that are large, the advanced sleep phase, us older people, what we do is we recommend light later in the day because you want to push it in the other direction. Now, the sun isn't often out late in the evening. It is now this time of year, but not always. So what we recommend is go out as late in the day as possible while the sun is still out. Again, no sunglasses, and get your late afternoon, early evening light exposure. There are light boxes that one can buy if you're living in it somewhere in the world where you just don't have a lot of light. There are light boxes. The same light boxes that are used for seasonal affective disorder can be used for your circadian rhythms. It's doing the same thing. For our morning larks or advanced people, we do not recommend morning melatonin, right? You would have to take it in the morning in order to delay your rhythm. Melatonin is not a very good sleeping pill. Here, I'll get a little bit into that part of it. I know people like to use it, and if it works for you, that's great. It's fairly safe, but data shows it's not a very good sleeping pill. But it does have some sedating properties, which is why you would never take it in the morning if you're trying to shift your advanced sleep phase. And I'll get back to it for insomnia in a minute. But so that's the full circadian rhythm picture. And it's really important because there's so many people who think they have insomnia, but really they're just owls or larks and they're trying to go to sleep at the wrong time. If you're an owl, if your body doesn't get sleepy till 1 in the morning, but you go to bed at 11, yeah, you're going to feel like you have insomnia. It's still going to take you hours to fall asleep because your body just isn't ready yet. So that's important to understand about yourself, to listen to your body. One of the most important things you can do. And during this pandemic, we had time to listen to our bodies. Listen to your body. Figure out, when do you actually get sleepy? When are you actually feeling alert in the morning? When are you waking up feeling like, oh yeah, I feel like I've had enough good night's sleep? So,
two questions on the light. I've heard some people talk about using red light and in their rooms before they go to bed to kind of help aid sleep. I don't know if that's based in any sort of reality or it's just a fad or.
Yeah, red light it's not that red light's going to help you sleep. It's that blue light is going to keep you from sleeping.
Okay.
So the blue light is what you have on your phones and your computers. It's that wavelength, the blue-green wavelength that helps, that wakes us up. And so one of our sleep hygiene, so we were talking before, there are some cardinal rules for good sleep, and this might be a good time to get into that. And then there's sleep hygiene rules. Just like you have dental hygiene, there's good sleep hygiene. One of the good sleep hygiene rules is you don't use equipment, phones, computers, anything with light close to bedtime. So first of all, we tend to hold those things like this. They're very close to our faces. So it's not like you're reading a real book and there's ambient light, which is a little better, but you're holding them right here. And so that blue light is going right into your brain saying, hey, let's wake up, let's party. It's not time to sleep, right? Don't secrete any melatonin. Same thing in the middle of the night. You start reading or looking at your phone in the middle of the night or turning on lights, it's telling your brain, stop secreting melatonin, time to get up. Not the time you want to be doing that. So that's one of our sleep hygiene rules. Let me tell you the 4 cardinal rules, and then we'll get into some of the pharmacological treatment. I see those questions are popping up. 4 cardinal rules for good sleep. The first one is don't spend too much time in bed. reduce your time in bed. The longer you stay in bed, the more fragmented your sleep becomes. The less time you spend in bed, the more consolidated. So if you want 7 to 8 hours of sleep, you should be in bed half an hour more than the amount of sleep that you want. So if we want 8 hours of sleep, we shouldn't be in bed more than 8.5 hours. What does the insomniac patient do? Oh, God, I didn't sleep a wink last night. I'm going to go to bed 2 hours earlier to try to get more sleep. Now they're extending their time in bed and making their sleep even worse. So reduce time in bed is number one. Number two, get up at the same time every day. No matter how much sleep you had the night before, get up at the same time every day. That helps stabilize your circadian rhythm, and it helps the whole homeostat. Because if you sleep in till 10 one morning, you're not necessarily going to be awake long enough by the time it's time to go to bed for you, that sleep drive to be high enough for you to be able to fall asleep, right? Always comes back to those two processes. So you get up at the same time every day, 7 days a week. Okay. By the way, these rules are especially important for people with insomnia. If you have no trouble sleeping, I don't care what you do, right? It's for people who have trouble sleeping that these become the crucial rules. Rule number 3, you don't go to bed unless you're sleeping. I don't care what time the clock says. I don't care what your bed partner says. I'm going to bed. Why don't you come to bed too? You go to bed when you are sleepy, because if you're not sleepy, you're not going to fall asleep, and then that's going to cause more problems. Okay. Rule number 4, if you're not sleeping, don't be in bed. Get out of bed. So what that means is you feel tired, you feel sleepy, you get into bed, and lo and behold, you start tossing and turning, and you start getting really tense. Oh my God, I can't fall asleep. And the tenser and more anxious you get, the harder it is to fall asleep, right? I don't want all that emotion happening in bed. So you get out of bed. As soon as you start feeling tense, whether it's in the beginning of the night or the middle of the night, you get out of bed. And the whole idea here is to associate the bed with relaxation and sleep. I want you to look at the bed and go, I'm going to sleep. I don't want you looking at the bed and going, oh my God, I know I'm not going to be able to sleep when I get to bed, right? So you never want to associate the bed with tension. So as soon as you start feeling upset about not sleeping, you get out of bed, you leave the bedroom, and you go do something that's quiet and relaxing for you, hopefully without too much light. You can't sit in the dark, so there has to be some light. But again, not phones in your face. And you stay out of the bedroom until you feel your eyes closing. And then you go back to bed, because you want to fall asleep in bed, not in your comfy chair in the living room. Right? If lo and behold, you get into bed and suddenly again, you're not falling asleep and you get tense, you just get out of bed again. And you do this all night long, if necessary, until you can get into bed and fall asleep. Along with that, you still have to get up at that same time every morning, right? So that next day, you're going to be tired. You're going to be sleep deprived, which means the next night you'll have an easier time falling asleep. If not, you sort of do that again. So anyway, those are the 4 cardinal rules for good sleep. Now, along with that, we have what we call good sleep hygiene. And those would include no alcohol close to bedtime, number 1. Alcohol does make you sleepy initially, but several hours later, when the alcohol leaves your bloodstream, it wakes you right back up again. Alcohol causes insomnia. Let's say you have a lot to drink with dinner. After dinner, you feel a little sleepy. But by the time it's time to go to bed, a few hours later, you're wide awake. So if you're having trouble sleeping, think about whether you're having alcohol, and that's part of the reason. Caffeine, you've all heard about caffeine causing poor sleep. I have so many people tell me I can have an espresso before bedtime. It doesn't bother me. Yeah, it does. You're just not aware of it. So we say no caffeine after lunch. I hesitated only because I have this wonderful cartoon of these 2 bears. One's lying down. I think it's Mrs. Bear lying down, and Mr. Bear is sitting up, and she says to him, How many times have I told you no coffee after summer? So couldn't hibernate. But anyway, no coffee after lunch is if you're having trouble sleeping. No caffeine. Caffeine, not just coffee, right? People say, oh, I don't have coffee. I don't have caffeine. I just drink green tea. Green tea is full of caffeine. So think about what you're ingesting and how much caffeine might be in it. Diet sodas have more caffeine than the non-diet equivalent. So Diet Coke has more caffeine than regular Coke. So pay attention to that. Make sure your bedroom is dark. Remember we said melatonin is secreted in darkness. Make it as dark as possible. Blackout shades, if you need masks, whatever, as dark as possible. Quiet as possible and a comfortable temperature. That's a personal thing, but you don't want it too hot or too cold.
On that point, I've heard people say on temperature, like has to be like in the 60s or something like that. Like there's these prescribed, is it just more of what your comfort level is?
It's more what you're comfortable. It really is more a personal thing.
Yeah.
One of the most important rules is get rid of your clock. I gave away my punchline. I usually say, tell me what is the first thing you do when you wake up at night? And you would all say, go to the bathroom. And I would say, nope, you look at your clock and you go, oh yeah, right? Why do you need to know what time it is in the middle of the night? You don't. It does two things when you look at the clock. The first is you have to wake yourself up. So, sleep goes, we have different stages of sleep. Stage one is that transitional sleep. And when you're first just waking up, you're in that transitional sleep. In order to know what time it is, you have to open your eyes, maybe lift your head and look at it, or you have to reach over to pick up your phone to, see what time it is. Either way, you're taking yourself to full awakening so that you can comprehend that it's 1:10 in the morning and you want to be asleep. This is where our homeostat comes back in, because you've just woken yourself up. It's going to be harder to go back to sleep because you're not awake long enough to be sleepy enough to go back to sleep, right? So try not to look at the clock. When you first wake up, keep your eyes closed. Try to just, maybe turn over or whatever, get yourself comfortable again, and you have a much greater chance then of falling back to sleep. And the only way not to be tempted to look at that clock is to get rid of it. You don't need a clock in your room. If you need an alarm, put it under the bed or in a drawer, somewhere where you can't reach it and you're not tempted to look at it. Timepieces don't belong in the bedroom.
Or televisions, I'm assuming.
That's right. So I'm going to get back to the television in a minute. I want to get back to the waking up and needing to go to the bathroom. So usually what people say is, no, I wake up because I have to go to the bathroom. I have to go pee. Usually that doesn't wake you up. Usually you wake up first and you realize there's pressure, so you get up and go to the bathroom. If you can keep yourself from waking up, fully waking up, you might not even need to get up. If, though, you suddenly realize, yeah, there's all this pressure and you do want to get up, the key here is try not to turn on lights. I don't want you falling. I don't want you walking into walls. So if you need a night light, that's okay. But you don't want a lot of bright light because, again, that's telling your brain, stop secreting melatonin. It's time to get up. Okay. Television's part of sleep hygiene. Don't belong in the bedroom. Reading doesn't belong in the bedroom. The bed is for sleep, not for all those other things we tend to do in bed. And sex, but even that I say only if it's satisfying. If it's frustrating, I don't want that done in the bedroom either, because I want you associating the bed with relaxation and not tension. So, right? So that's another rule. Let me think. Other sleep hygiene rules. Exercise. The more you exercise, the more physically fit you are, the better your sleep. They do go hand in hand. The key is trying not to exercise too close to bedtime. When you exercise, your core body temperature is going up. Harder to fall asleep, right? It takes about 6 hours for it to start dropping. So the ideal time to exercise is 6 hours before bedtime. You can't always work your life around that. So the key is just trying not to exercise too close to when it's time to go to bed.
What about eating?
A lot of the latest data suggests, this time-restricted eating that you hear so much about, is to try to eat in 10 is a little rough, but at least a 12-hour window. Hopefully with that last meal not close to bedtime, too close to bedtime. And that again has to do with the circadian rhythm of our digestive system and everything else. So if your first meal of the day. And that coffee if you're having coffee with milk or sugar, that counts, or a sweetener. So if your first thing you ingest is, let's say, 7 in the morning, the last thing you ingest shouldn't be later than 7 o'clock at night. So you try to stay within your 12-hour window.
Are there certain dietary, like for me, my Achilles heel is chocolate chip cookies, right? And I get gluten-free ones. That way I think they're healthy for me. And I had 2 last night, and I had a shitty night's sleep, right? And so I realized that the sugars do wonders for me as well, in terms of knocking me off my cycle. And I eat relatively early, but I had 2 cookies, and I'm like, oh crap, I was up at 2 in the morning, and I'm like, oh man.
That's the same thing as the alcohol. A lot of it is the sugar and the alcohol. So yeah, that will do it. There are some foods that we think help promote sleep, foods that have tryptophan in them. Tryptophan is an amino acid that we also produce in our body, but tryptophan is found in bananas and fish and milk. You have a glass of milk before you go to bed. Turkey, I don't suggest you eat a turkey or fish necessarily right before you go to bed. And the data is weak. We used to have tryptophan pills that people would take, and then they got all contaminated and they were pulled off the market. I think they might be back now. But that's not really going to help if you've got insomnia. What's really going to help is your behavior, changing your behavior, doing those 4 cardinal rules and the good sleep hygiene. That's what's going to help you.
So move into some of the pharmaceutical type things that people are asking, or the external pieces, because there's also a question about, is melatonin good for children here? So
so there are no data for melatonin in children. If whoever asked that is willing to let me know, why did you want to give the melatonin to the child? Was it for sleep? Was it to shift rhythms? What was the reason for it? Anyone willing to
Joanne?
Agree that they asked that question?
I was speaking with someone recently, and they said that they were giving their child melatonin at night to help them fall asleep. And so I didn't know. I was just curious, since that was part of our thing.
I would not recommend. I don't know how old the child was. We sometimes might recommend it for teenagers who are extremely phase delayed, and the light alone isn't helping. And as I said, sometimes we combine that with low dose melatonin. I would not give it to a child to help them fall asleep. And
I didn't think it was a good idea either.
No. And as I said, the data are not that great for melatonin as a sleeping pill. Again, in adults, it's fairly safe. So if you're taking it and it works, great. I'm not going to change it. Right? It's not broken. Don't fix it. But it's not something that I recommend. There was a question on CBD. Great question. There's quite a bit of research going on the effects of CBD on sleep. We don't have the data yet. So I cannot tell you. I'll come back in a year. By then we should have some results, and I'll let you know. We just don't know if it works well or not for sleep.
There was somebody would mention, I don't know if again this is true, but I heard that long-term use of sleep aid drugs can have a negative impact over the long haul. So, I mean, again, I think people can kind of get caught up into the habit of taking it like they need it. Are there some negative consequences to taking sleep aids over long period?
You have to weigh the risks and benefits. Some of these drugs have been around long enough that you'd think we had really good longitudinal data, but once they're approved, the research stops on them. So the data we have is either epidemiological, meaning that, thousands of people are asked about, do you take this drug? And, they're asked hundreds of questions. And then people do statistics and say, oh, it looks like the people that have been using Zolpidem, Ambien for 20 years seem to have this problem and that problem. And yeah, they may be related, but that doesn't tell you about cause and effect.
Right.
So we don't know for sure. We do know that if you are so sleep deprived, you've got horrible insomnia and you can't sleep, we do know there are serious consequences to that. And we always recommend behavioral changes first. There's a behavioral therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. A lot of what I told you our Cardinal Rules and stuff, all are part of the CBTI. That is the best treatment for insomnia. It is the most effective, the most long lasting. It's like, you've heard the expression, you can give a man a fish or you can teach him how to fish, right? I could give you a fish, I could give you a sleeping pill, or I could teach you how to sleep. And the behavioral stuff reteaches you how to sleep. So no matter when you have a problem again, you know what to do. Having said that, there are times when sleeping pills are appropriate. Some people just won't buy into the behaviors. They can't change their behaviors, whatever. And then you have to decide which is worse, not getting enough sleep and the consequences of that, or taking a sleeping pill with the potential problems associated with that. And everybody's got to weigh that out for themselves, given their own medical history and et cetera, to see what is the right answer for them. There are, I don't know, I'd say maybe 10, I've sort of lost count, approved sleeping pills, approved by the FDA specifically for sleep. Then there are a whole bunch of drugs that are used off-label for sleep. Some of them are over-the-counter, some of them are prescription. So trazodone, which is an antidepressant, it's actually not a very good antidepressant, is often used by physicians for people who are having trouble sleeping, because that happens to have a side effect of making you sleepy. So you're trying to figure out what is just the right dose to make you sleepy so you can fall asleep, but you're not too sleepy when you wake up in the morning, right? That's a very hard thing to determine. And trazodone, it turns out, is not a great sleeping pill. Again, if you're taking it and it works for you and you don't wake up sedated, great. But a lot of people have problems with that. The one I particularly don't like is diphenhydramine, which is what you find in all the over-the-counter PM drugs. Tylenol PM, Advil PM, Excedrin PM, blah, 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 right? If you're using it every once in a while, because you know you're going to have a bad night's sleep and you got a big day tomorrow, whatever, fine. If you're using it every night, it is not a good drug to be taking every night. And it is especially bad in older adults. And again, most of you don't look older, but maybe you have parents that are using it or whatever.
Great question.
There are a lot of serious side effects to diphenhydramine.
So the great question that Joy asked about you have the deep sleep, the light sleep, the REM sleep. Is there a preferred number or percentage of your sleep in those categories? Because I have a similar.
You need them all. You need them all. Some people say, "Oh, deep sleep is your best sleep. It's the most important." Or REM. They're all important, and you need them all.
And to follow up on that, we talked a little bit about what happens when we don't sleep well and some of the ways that we can promote better sleep. Can you just talk a little bit about what happens when we sleep? Some people talk about neuroplasticity, the wiring happening, or flushing toxins. I mean, what are some of the highlights of actually getting good sleep?
Yeah, so it helps with memory consolidation. I'm not going to go into the neurophysiology of it because that's, way too complicated and not necessary for this audience. But memory consolidation, we do now know that deep sleep. So remember I said we have different stages of sleep. So stage 1, N1, is that very lightest transitional sleep when you're not fully asleep yet, but you're not fully awake anymore. Then we go into stage 2 and then stage 3. Stage 3 is our very deepest level of sleep. And then REM, rapid eye movement, is our dream sleep. It's the more and more research now suggesting that our deep sleep does clear out the toxins at night, particularly amyloid. And amyloid is when you get a lot of buildup of amyloid that can lead to Alzheimer's disease. It seems that slowly sleep clears that out. So that's one of the other things that happens. It's healing. Things sort of start healing when you sleep, which makes me crazy when you're in a hospital and they come around and wake you up at 6 a.m. to see how you're doing. Let the patient sleep, right? So those are some of the more important things that
Awesome.
Go on while we're sleeping. Why sleep is important.
Thank you for that, Sonia. I read something recently too, and it struck me when you were mentioning don't go to bed if you're tired at night. I can't remember where I read this, but that, you know, we then have these ultradian rhythms during the day, and that at night we actually have a little spike when we're actually getting closer to sleep time. And I think the theory was something around, just evolutionarily speaking, that was sort of gather, you know, find your safe place and all that. And I think I heard this about a month ago, and I started thinking about it, and that happens to me for sure, where I'm like, oh no, 9:30, and I just get this little ping. And I've chosen to kind of fold laundry and sort of ride it out. And lo and behold, it instead of it getting in my head and saying, oh no, hopefully I can get to sleep tonight, that it actually has worked for me. Is that real? Is that true? Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, we do have ultradian rhythms, which are shorter rhythms. It all comes down to listening to your body, right? Mm-hmm. Listen to your body. Your body will tell you when it's alert and when it's not. And you pay attention and follow what your body's telling you, then you don't get into trouble.
You know, as you talk about that, Sonia, I mean, we're moving into this 30-day practice of practice. And I just think the practice of listening to your body in and of itself it's a lost art, you know, and there's a lot of science that suggests when you're aware, you're making different choices. So I just love that. And I'm just curious to know, is if you were to if there was like a bit of advice or this one thing, and there's a guy who always says, if you could put a saying on a billboard to kind of convey the importance of whatever it is you're advocating for, like, for example, sleep, what would be that one thing you would kind of want to have people on their billboards as they're driving by around the importance of sleep?
Prioritize sleep, but not while you're driving. Prioritize sleep. I think that's the problem with putting on a billboard. I think the problem is that people don't realize how important sleep is. And it's as important as eating and, you know, lots of fluids during the day. It's part of that stool, that three-legged stool. Prioritize your sleep, because if you're sleeping well, everything else gets better.
Yeah, I've heard that sleep even relates
nice.
to like weight gain, like not getting enough sleep can have an impact on your weight. And there's just all kinds of factors related to the benefits and the health benefits of sleep. And that's
heart disease, hypertension. Yeah, there's all sorts of negative consequences of not sleeping.
Yeah. I want to again come back. Okay, go ahead, Martha. Ask the question. We want to kind of open it up to people anyway, because we're almost out of time.
Unmute yourself.
So one thing I've seen and working with teens is that, and parents, is that parents will hear this information, which you're delivering in a really sensible, well-balanced, lovely way. I'm not saying that you're shrill, but the parents then take it and think, oh my God, sleep is so important. And that they'll go and turn it into the screeching, what are you doing about, oh my God, you're going to fail. Like it turns into a lot of the talk around coaching sleep has this really stressing kind of thing. And I've seen it with parents. And I've heard teens complain about it. Like they don't want to lecture. Yeah, they want to feel better, but they don't want to lecture. And with me, I noticed that I had a breakthrough fairly recently in sleep when I realized that I'm an owl, insufferable night owl. But I realized that when I go to bed, I'm like, I might as well. Like it has that kind of tone to it. Like I might as well try, and like, and I shifted it to say like, no, when I'm a parent for my children, I created these lovely bedtime rituals. Like, oh yeah, let's have a special story for you. And let's do
exactly
this.
Right.
I started viewing myself as that beloved child and going like, oh, do I want to watch a funny news show now? No, that's not, I can watch that tomorrow during the day and catch up. Or do I want to have this kind of thing? Or what do I want to picture? And like really keep it as if I'm like tucking myself in and visualizing lovely things and having a good story, you know, in the dark. So I think it's how to coach it is not just saying prioritize it, but prioritize it and do it with love and tenderness and with the end in sight, not
absolutely. No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think for your working with parents of teens, explaining how a delayed sleep phase is normal is one of the most important things they can learn. So they understand why their kids are going to sleep, when they're going to sleep, and it's getting up late in the day, et cetera, et cetera. It's really important for them to know.
I just love too, Martha, that the idea of having a ritual before you go to bed, like having an unplugging ritual like that is really a beautiful way of expressing it, because you're really priming your body to what you were saying, Sonia, to look at the bed as a place to rest. And that's really great.
Ritual is really it's all about conditioning, right? It's classical conditioning. We want to condition our brain to do and think certain things at certain times. Martha, you said something that reminded me of another sleep hygiene tip that I want to give you. You know, in our busy lives, often the first moment we have to sit down and think is when we get into bed at night. And that is the wrong time to start thinking. So if that's a problem for you, your mind just racing and keeping you up, we suggest you find 10 minutes earlier in the day, far away from when you go to bed at night, where you turn off your phone and you sit down and you worry. We call it setting a worry time. And that's I know it sounds so silly, but it works. That's your time to think about all those things that you tend to think about at night. And again, it's about conditioning. If you do that every day between 10 and 10:15, then you don't have to do it at night. And if you do start doing it at night, you can say, wait a second, I have tomorrow to think about this. And it's like practicing piano. You know, the more you do it, the better you get. The more you do your worry time every day, the less you'll start having all these intrusive thoughts at night. And it's another sleep hygiene.
I also know that I've never come up with a single good idea, not a single one.
They always seem good when it's in the middle of the
night. Never useful.
I just love it. When you said that, Sonia, last week, the speaker said, she quoted somebody saying, whatever you're doing right now, you're getting better at. You know, and I think what it is that we're doing right now to prepare ourselves for sleep, I just think it's great, because I'm a really good sleeper. It's just interesting, but I think that's the part of getting people to understand the importance of it, to your point. And to your point, Martha, is not feeling preachy about it. You know, it's just, how do we help people understand the value of sleep, where they take it seriously, that they're worth a good night's sleep. You know, it's such a, I don't know. Damon, anything else, or anyone else has anything to add or share, or a question? Because sleep is fascinating to me. Rody?
Yeah, just, and Sonia, thank you for joining us tonight. Kind of a two-part question. Snooze button, good or bad? And if you are using a snooze button, is a longer snooze period better or worse? Or shorter better, longer better?
I hate snooze buttons.
I love you. I do too.
Usually what people do is they say, oh, I'm really going to want to snooze. I don't really have to get up till 7:30. So I'll set my clock for 7 and then I'll snooze, 20 times or whatever. Set your clock for when you need to get up. All you're doing is disrupting your sleep with the snooze button. So set it for when you want to get up and then get up. Snooze doesn't add anything. It just makes your sleep worse.
Pisses me off when I hear it in my house.
Yeah, no. So long or short doesn't even come into the question, because I don't want you using the snooze button anyway.
Yeah, get rid of the clock, Rody.
Yeah, that's right. And your clock shouldn't be in there to push the snooze button. There you go. Right. Sorry, it's probably not the answer you wanted. But.
Just also, no, actually it is. That's, but kind of curious as to the relation as far as meditation and sleep, as far as supplement, not so much taking place of sleep, but as far as kind of supplementing sleep.
Yeah. Oh, supplement. You mean instead of sleep, or?
No, not basically
so
the whole sleep, but in addition to.
Yeah. Meditation is relaxing. It doesn't do the same thing that sleep does, but it's very good for centering, for quieting your mind. I mean, meditation is a wonderful thing. There are people that do it before they go to bed to help them relax to get to sleep. That's fine. But it is not, the effect of meditation is not the same as the effect of sleep, which is why, you're never going to do one instead of the other, but to do them, yeah, meditation's great. I have nothing bad to say about meditation.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Sonia, you've been a gift. I want to wrap you up, and I just want to do a roadshow with you from now on. Sarah, what do you have?
There's another Sonia asking.
Yeah, that's Sarah, actually.
Sonia too.
Oh, my daughter is Sarah, and she has that same red hair.
I think more than maybe a question. I just keep thinking about, this pandemic world we've just lived through this past year, and how, my daughter in college and in high school, and most people I know, there's not enough therapists out there for people. Like, everybody is trying to figure out, what were we going through? What just happened? What are we going to take with us? And I'm a pretty good sleeper. I definitely know it's been like 5 weeks. I'm doing an experiment. I'm not giving up alcohol, but I have tried to do some cleansing stuff. Mm-hmm. Sleep so much better. And I'm a pretty decent sleeper, but even better through that. But my question is more, with all the things that people have been going through, without kind of taking care of this part of their life, I can't imagine somebody with sleep issues under normal circumstances, how I just feel like it's listening to you. It seems so much more important for people to grapple with this and figure out how to do those behavioral changes, because we may have another pandemic. We might be in isolation again. And, or even if not, somebody's going to die. Someone's going to get a divorce. Someone's going to fail a test or lose a job. Like, stress things will happen, even if it's not as big as a quarantine. So I think my question is just more general about how to raise the level of awareness and teach people, so that when these bad things happen, right, it's worse, where your head's racing.
It's all about education, isn't it? I think the way we do it is like this. I have done more interviews in the last year. I mean, I've done a lot of interviews always, but this last year I've been called much more often. I was at NPR 3 times, and getting the word out any way we can to help people understand not just the importance, but what they can be doing, what they should be doing. I don't like the word should so much, but it's all about education. And we've been trying to educate people for years. I mean, I've been at this for 40 years now, and that's how long I've been trying to educate, not just the general public, but physicians, having them understand the importance of sleep and what to do about it. Administrators and businesses, anything. You can name anybody, and everyone needs to be educated.
Teenagers, college kids, like, who naturally want to be up later and have to be up earlier.
At Stanford always gives all their exams in the evening, because that's when the college kids are most alert. They never give morning exams. Yeah, makes sense, right? So so all those different groups definitely need education. We're doing the best we can at getting out there, but maybe now all of you could go out and, talk to the people and then they'll talk to the people they know.
What's your routine? What's your nighttime ritual?
I'm a pretty good sleeper. It's changed a little bit recently. I lost my husband a few months ago.
Oh.
So my routine's changing some. Thank you. But I would say I'm usually in bed and asleep around 9:30, and then I wake up around 6:30.
I want to just give you a big, juicy hug right now, because I just, thank you. Thank you so much, Sonia.
This was my pleasure. Anytime, Scott, I'm happy to come back if you want me to. This was a lot of fun.
We will definitely be doing a second round. We're going to do some, one of the things we're being asked to do is to work with some folks here in Butte County with all the fires and a lot of the trauma. We want to do some work with people in the front lines to teach them good practices. And again, start putting into practice some of the tips that you've given us, and keep experimenting. I think that's the thing that at least I've taken away from this is, keep experimenting with, Sarah, you really inspired me in our last month in terms of just making that choice and, tweaking things here and there. Like, what's my focus going to be? I like that worry thing too. I'm going to practice that. I really think that's a great one, because if I start to ruminate, I was like, I'll put that on my worry list tomorrow.
Right.
That's right. Beautiful.
You talk about frontline workers. That's where you also get a lot into shift work and all the problems of shift work and sleep.
Yeah. It's
another whole area.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely bring you back, and I'll probably bring you into some of the first responders that I'm working with in the search and rescue world, because I think they need to hear this story. And it, you know, redundancy is the mother of learning, so we got to keep it out there. And just really appreciate and want to just send you, from me personally, I think from everyone here, just a great deep appreciation and just love and compassion for you. And so you can always call me anytime. So.
Thank
Damon,
you all.
Yeah, Damon,
lovely chatting with all of you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks, Sonia. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Everybody.
Thanks, everybody.